Hey everyone, welcome to the first lesson of this course. We're going to start with the basics and we're going to start with what is an option. So an option is a contract that grants the buyer, which is also sometimes referred to as the holder, the right but not the obligation to buy or sell an underlying asset. And what we're going to be talking about is equity options or stock options. So the underlying asset is going to be 100 shares of a particular stock. So you have the right but not the obligation to buy or sell an underlying asset at a set price. Now, that is what we refer to in option lingo as the strike price, on or before a certain date, which we refer to as the expiration date. Now, there are two types of options. There are call options and put options. They're really two sides of the same coin. The call option gives you the right to buy an underlying asset, like 100 shares of stock, at a set price, which we explained is called the strike price, on or before a certain date known as the expiration date. That is a call option. Typically, if you are a buyer of an option, as opposed to a seller, which you can be either, but if you're a buyer of a call option, you are hoping that the underlying stock price will go up and therefore will increase the value of this option contract that you hold. Put options, on the other hand, give you the right to sell 100 shares of the underlying stock at a set price on or before a certain date. Now, put options are bought by individuals who are hoping that the underlying stock will go down. And as the stock goes down, the value of a put option, which gives you the right to sell shares at a fixed price, hopefully above where the market price is, as the stock goes down, the value of that put option contract increases. And we'll cover this in more detail in just a minute. To help you understand call options, let's set aside put options for the moment and let's just focus on call options. To help you understand call options, I've put together a little example from a show that you may be familiar with. And let's just run with this hypothetical scenario. This will help you understand how call options work. And then later we'll have through the same story, we'll talk about put options so you can understand how put options work. Now, Michael Scott, let's say, is interested in buying 100 shares of the company that he loves working for, Dunder Mifflin, ticker symbol DMIF, DMIF, which anybody who follows the show knows that this is a paper company that he works for and, as I mentioned, absolutely loves. Unfortunately, Michael has fallen on hard times and does not currently have enough money in the bank to purchase the 100 shares of his company's stock. So what can Michael do? Michael, he expects to inherit a large sum of money sometime during the next 2 years, and this would give him enough to buy the 100 shares. He wants to participate in the upside, the success of the company. So as the company does well, hopefully the stock price will go up and he will make money from owning the shares, right? But he doesn't have enough to buy 100 shares. So what can he do? Oh, and I should mention that Dunder Mifflin will soon debut the Pyramid, which is a revolutionary tablet computer in the shape of a triangle. And so Michael doesn't want to miss the upside potential when his company debuts that product. And that's another reason why Michael wants to purchase 100 shares. So what can Michael do to capture the upside potential of 100 shares that would cost him much less than purchasing the shares outright? So how can he still capture that upside? Well, one thing that Michael can do is he can purchase a call option on Dunder Mifflin shares, right? Which would give him the right to buy 100 shares at a certain price, known as the strike price, on or before a certain expiration date. So specifically, let's say that Dunder Mifflin shares are now trading at $50 a share, and he can purchase a call option with a $50 strike price that expires 2 years from now. So the expiration date is 2 years from, let's say, today, the day that he's buying this option. Now, this will give him the right to purchase Dunder Mifflin shares at $50 anytime between the purchase date, which is what we're saying today, and the expiration date, which is 2 years from now. So over the next 2 years, this contract that he holds, he's the holder of it, or the buyer, whatever you want to say, this piece of paper, or digital paper, I mean, you don't actually physically get a piece of paper when you buy an option, but your broker recognizes that you have a contract that says you can purchase, no matter what the stock price does, if it goes up to 100, or if it goes down to 25, you can purchase 50 or 100 shares at $50 a share. Now, if the stock went down to $25, that piece of paper that you're holding, that contract, would not really be worth much, would it? Nobody would want to buy a piece of paper that gives them the right to buy at 50 if they can just go to the open market and buy at 25. Now, if the stock goes up to $100 a share, well, suddenly that piece of paper has a lot of value, right? Because you can turn in that piece of paper and buy 100 shares for 50 and immediately turn around and sell it in the market for 100, right? So how much money would Michael need to purchase this call option? Well, let's say for the sake of this hypothetical that this option contract costs $7 per share. Now, remember, all option contracts are standardized contracts, so they are a right to buy 100 shares of the underlying. So if it costs you $7 per share, and you have to, at minimum, buy one option contract, which is worth or representative of 100 shares, you have to multiply that by 100. So let's say he's able to buy the option contract at a value of $7 per share. That means he would have to spend $700 to cover the 700 or the 100 underlying shares. So $700 to purchase that $50 strike price option expiring 2 years from now. And this note here says in words what I just said to you about the 100 shares and the multiplier of 100 that you have to apply to all prices quoted for options. Options are quoted on a per share basis, so you always have to multiply by 100. So upon expiration, the $50 call option will allow Michael to capture any upside in Dunder Mifflin shares above $57. Now you may be thinking, why is it not $50? That's the strike price. Shouldn't he capture any upside above $50? Yes, that's true if he paid nothing, if he got this option for free. But we've got to remember that he paid $7 per share of premium. That's some additional lingo there. We call that premium. What you pay for the option is called premium, kind of like your insurance premiums. So he paid $7 per share, so we've got to add that to the strike price of 50. So $57 would be his break even. Okay. So let me show you a profit loss graph. So here we have the underlying price. Forgive my handwriting. And on this axis we have profit, the amount of profit. Now, if we know he pays $7 per share, right? So he's going to lose that $7 for sure if the stock price is, so let's say this is the 50 strike, right? I'm going to get rid of this. So this is the price of the stock, okay, the underlying stock. So let me switch colors here maybe. He's going to lose that full $7 anywhere where if the stock price is trading below 50, right? So if it's trading at 50 or 45 or say 40 down here, he will lose $7 or $700 because you got to multiply it by 100, like we explained. Now, if it's above 50, every dollar it's above 50, the option contract will be worth at least $1. This is upon expiration. So this is the profit and loss at expiration. The graph looks a little bit different before expiration because your option will still have value. You don't even down at 40 if you haven't gotten to the expiration date yet, because there's still hope that the price could come back up above 50. Now, so there's value above 50. So our losses get smaller and smaller, but we've got to have the stock price go up enough to counter that full $7 of premium paid, right? So then at some point it crosses the axis into positive profit territory and continues to climb to infinity in theory. So if the stock price goes to infinity, your profits can go to infinity. Now that doesn't happen very often, as you might imagine, but you can go up quite a bit. Now this point where it crosses the axis mathematically should be the strike price of 50 plus the premium paid of 7. So your break even, let's call that BE, break even, would be at $57 for this call option. So really he starts to profit above $57 every dollar that the stock goes up. If we were to go back here, that should be $100 of profit, or $1 of profit, right? Which is $100 because you multiply it by 100. It goes up to 59. This would equate to $2 of profit, or $200. So you can see how that works. Now let's look at kind of to compare buying the call option versus buying 100 shares. I want to show you, kind of the power of options and why options are pretty cool. So how much money would Michael need to purchase 100 shares? Well, assuming the facts that I gave you, shares are trading at $50 per share, it would cost Michael $5,000 to purchase 100 shares, right? So here's the math that I did for you. 500. Excuse me, this typo should be 50. 50 times 100 is 5,000, right? So it cost him $5,000. Now, recall that what we paid for the $50 strike price option cost Michael $700. So it cost minus 700 is 4,300, right? So it cost 4,300 more to buy the shares. So purchasing 100 shares would cost Michael more than 7 times as much as purchasing the $50 call option, right? 7 times 700 would be 4,900. Cost 5,000 for the shares. So continuing on with this example, how much profit would Michael have made from his call option if Dunder Mifflin shares traded at $80 upon expiration? Well, if upon expiration Dunder Mifflin traded at $80 a share, then Michael's $50 strike call option would be worth $30 a share. Now, to understand how I calculated that, you can look at the numbers that I put below, but you would take the current price, which we said is $80 in this hypothetical future scenario, and we would subtract the strike price of 50. That would give us 30. We would have $30 of value per share on this option, which makes sense, right? Because we have this piece of paper, this contract that says we can buy 100 shares, up to 100 shares for $50 a piece, no matter what, even if the stock skyrockets to the moon, which in this case, going up to 80 is a pretty big move. So even though the shares are trading at 80, we have this piece of paper that allows us to buy it at 50, giving us a great advantage, right? So we can buy it at 50, immediately sell it for 80, and that difference is this 30. So this is this is the value of your contract, right? At expiration, there's no more time value. We'll talk about time value later. There's no more time value because you have no more time left on this contract. So all that's left is intrinsic value. And that's 30 because if you can go out and sell for 80 and purchase at 50, that contract that gives you that right should be worth 30. Now, remember, we always have to use our multiplier of 100. So that means the value of that contract would be 3,000, right? But as we're saying here on the side here, Michael paid 700, right? So we've got to subtract 700 to calculate our profit. So this is our profit, $2,300. Now, if you do the math, it's more than triple what we paid, right? So it's more than 300%. It's actually 329% profit, so 329% return on what we invested. And the most we could have lost is 700, by the way, right? When you buy a call option, the most you can lose is what you pay for it, the premium you pay. So our downside is capped at 300 or 700, and our upside is, in theory, infinite. But you can see the stock moved. The stock didn't have to go up 329% to make a 329% return. The stock moved up $30, which is, more than a 50% return. Let's say, what is that, 60% return? Stock goes up 60%, you get a 329% return. So that's kind of the inherent leverage you have in options. Call options specifically, you have infinite upside and limited downside, which I like that game. Okay, so continuing with the comparison, how much profit would Michael have made if he had simply purchased the 100 shares at $50 a share? Well, we know that would cost him $5,000, right, for 100 shares. If the shares are now $80 a share, Michael's profit would be, so if it's $80 a share, 80 times 100, the value of his shares would be 8,000, right? We know he paid 5,000, so we've got to subtract 5,000. His profit would be 3,000, right? This is great. Like I said, 60% return. but it pales in comparison to the 329% return from the option, right? Now, as an aside, how much could Michael lose if Dunder Mifflin went bankrupt? Went to zero? Well, he would have lost $5,000, right? And the most he could have lost with the option is 700. So you can see on the downside too, you get some protection from options, from call options. Okay, so we finished our hypothetical with call options. So hopefully you have a better handle on call options and being a buyer or holder of call options specifically. We didn't talk about selling call options. That's another lesson. But let's talk about put options now, which is the other type of option. Now, continuing the story from before, let's say that Michael, rather than, so what you can do with a call option, you can sell it at any time. You can even sell it on the last day before it expires. And, if it went up to 80, like in that last example, it would have value, be worth $3,000 at least on expiration. Now, let's say rather than just selling his option to someone else, which is what most people do. Most people do not actually exercise options. And exercising an option, that's a term of art. That means you hold the option all the way through expiration. And then they kind of have this settlement. And they say, all right, so you have this contract that gives you the right to buy 100 shares at 50. If you want to exercise that contract, then hand us the money needed to buy at 50. So you hand the clearinghouse $5,000, and they'll deliver you 100 shares, even though the shares are at $80 in the open market. So let's say Michael did that. He just holds his contract, and it expires, and he decides to exercise it, right? So he buys the 100 shares for $5,000. Now, because the shares in this example are now trading at 80 when he did this, he has a paper gain of $3,000, right? His shares were now worth 8,000, he paid 5,000. But let's say 6 months later, reports start coming into the corporate headquarters that the batteries embedded in this pyramid tablet that Michael was super excited about. That's why he wanted to buy the stock in the first place. He thought this was going to be a hit. It's the next iPad or whatever, right? They get reports that these tablets are spontaneously exploding after about 1 year of use. And several people have reported injuries caused by these exploding batteries. Consumer protection agencies and are starting to do an informal investigation in 2 different states, let's say, right? Maybe in Pennsylvania, in Scranton, where they are located, and let's say in New York, right? They're starting to do an investigation. And then let's say at a lunch meeting with Jan, which is Michael's ex-girlfriend, and she's one of the corporate executives, Michael learns that the problem is much worse than he had originally thought, right? It's going to sink the company potentially. This tablet battery exploding issue is going to sink the company. So Michael's almost certain that Dunder Mifflin's price, which now has gone up to $100 a share, the stock price, once this gets out in the mainstream media, the stock price is going to take a big hit. And so what can he do? And in this hypothetical world and scenario, we're assuming there's not like insider trading laws and whatnot. Okay, so just bear with me. In real life, yeah, I know there's rules and laws, and executives who have inside information are not going to be able to trade on it. But they do have let's say they have a policy. So they have an internal company policy that, of course, Toby is there to enforce. He's the guy in HR, and he informs Michael that company policy prohibits him from selling any shares purchased in the last 2 years. You've got to, if you buy shares as a manager and executive in the company, you've got to, it's called the lockup period. You've got to hold those for at least 2 years before you can sell. So after criticizing Toby for this stupid comment, as Michael always does, or stupid policy, Michael starts asking around for ways to protect his unrealized profit. Right? It's just a paper profit now. He hasn't actually sold the shares. So if it's trading at $100 right now, that means his shares are worth $10,000. Bought them at $5,000, so he's got a $5,000 paper profit. So he kind of wants to somehow lock in his profit. So what can he do right before this battery issue hits the mainstream media and the shares start to tank? Well, so he thinks to himself, if only there were a way I could force someone to purchase my 100 shares for $100 each 18 months from now when his lockup period expires. So what can Michael do to profit from any downward move in the stock price that would offset his losses on his shares? Well, I think you may know the answer. The answer is Michael can purchase a put option on the Dunder Mifflin shares. Remember, this if Dunder Mifflin shares are trading at $100, the put option at $100 strike price, and let's say it expires 2 years from now, so it covers his 18-month lockup period that he needs. This contract, this piece of paper, is going to give him the right to sell his shares at $100 any time between the purchase date and the expiration date, right? So the only difference between the put and the call is this is a right to sell, whereas the call was a right to buy. So how much money would Michael need to purchase the $100 strike price put option? Well, let's say hypothetically speaking, it costs $15 per share for that put option multiplied by 100 shares. So let's say $1,500 total. That's how much premium Michael would need to pay to buy that $100 strike price put option. Now, upon expiration, that $100 put option will allow Michael to profit from any downside in Dunder Mifflin shares below $85 a share. Now, you may be thinking, if I buy a $100 strike put option, shouldn't I profit from any downside below $100? Because I have the right to sell my shares at $100 at any time, right? So if it goes down to 80, I can still sell it for 100 to somebody in the market. So then what that contract should be worth is the difference between the 100 and the 80, right? Which in that case would be $20 per share or $2,000 for the total contract. But you've got to take into account, that's true, that's kind of your profit without taking into account how much you paid for the option. So your net profit would be the value of the option minus what you paid in premium. So let's do a little diagram here. Another profit loss. Oops. Let me make the axis blue. Okay. So remember, this is the price of the underlying stock on this axis, and then this is the profit from your option contract, and this is for the $100 strike put, right, expiring 2 years from now. So let's what we know is we bought the $100 strike. So at $100, and let's put some other numbers down here. Let's put 85. Let's just see if I can 90, 95, right? Okay. So we know that if the stock is trading above $100 at expiration, the value of your option should be zero. It should be worthless, right? Because if you have a contract, a piece of paper that says you have the right to buy this stock at $100 a share, or sorry, sell this stock at $100 per share, and shares are trading for $120, let's say, so it's above the strike, nobody's going to want to buy that piece of paper that gives them the right to sell at 100 if they can just go sell in the open market at 120, right? Or 110, or even 101, right? They just go sell in the market. They don't need your piece of paper that says that they can sell it at 100. Why would they want to sell for less than what it's selling for in the market? But if at expiration the stock is trading at 90, that contract has some value, right? Because in the market you can't sell your stock for 100. You can only sell it for 90. And so that piece of paper has about $10 worth of value per share. So times 100, it's $1,000 worth of value, because you can take that piece of paper and take your shares, your 100 shares, and sell it for 100 when the market is only going to give you 90, right? So somebody who wants that piece of paper is going to pay up to $10 per share or $1,000 for the entire contract so that they can sell their shares at a higher price, right? Okay, so let's do this profit loss graph. So we know anything above 100 is going to be in negative territory, profits. So if this is zero, the zero line here, right? Actually, I'm being a stickler about my profits, or my graph. So we paid $15 per share premium, right? So you're going to lose $15, anything above 100, any price above 100, right? Now, every dollar below 100, you're going to make some profit. You're going to make $100 for every dollar that goes below. And I'm not good at drawing straight lines. This is actually going to cross the axis at 85. Just see if I can draw this line. And so that's kind of your profit loss graph. So you have, the most you can lose is $15, which is good news per share. So you have this flat line here above 100, where it's you just lose the full value of your premium. But kind of between 85 and 100, you still lose, but you lose less and less, the lower the stock price is. So you get to 8,500, which is your break-even price, right? Which is 100 minus your $15 strike. That's how you calculate your break-even for a put option. Take the strike price, subtract the premium paid, and that will tell you your break-even point. You don't lose money, you don't make money. That's why they call it break-even. Now, every dollar, so every dollar below, and because this graph is not really zoomed in, I'm going to do $5 increments, but every dollar below 85, you profit $100. So every $5 below 85, so let's say it's 80. Then if I do some little dots. This would be like a $5 profit at 75. This would be a $10 profit, or 500 and 1,000, right? So you can see you start to make money. Your contract starts to have value above and beyond the premium you paid below 85. So people buy put options to hedge. So if you have 100 shares in your portfolio of some underlying stock and you want to lock in those gains, just like Michael, you could buy a put option. Now it's only going to lock in your gains though below the break even. So you got to take into account what you pay for the option. So really, Michael can still lose. He wants to lock it in at 100. He can't quite really do that because he's paying $15 in premium per share. So he can lock in his gains by purchasing that $100 strike put at anything below 85. So for sure, he can lock in. He won't lose any money below $85 a share. Okay, so let's calculate how much profit would Michael make from his put option if Dunder Mifflin shares trade at $40 at expiration. So let's say the news about the exploding tablets gets out into the mainstream media. Nobody's buying the product. Company's getting a bad reputation. Maybe they'll get fined by these consumer protection agencies. So the stock has really sold off from 100 down to 40, right? And Michael bought that put option to kind of protect himself because, as you remember, he can't sell his shares because he's in this lockout period and he's got to hold his shares. Toby won't let him sell his shares. So here's the math, and maybe I'll just whiteboard this as well. If you remember, we bought that put option for $15 or $1,500 total for the contract, right? And so to calculate the value of this put option, we need to take the strike price, which is $100, and then we need to subtract the current market price of 40, current market, and that difference is $60. So if you have a piece of paper that allows you to sell 100 shares at 100, the market will pay up to $60 a share for that piece of paper if the shares are currently trading for 40, right? Because in theory, what they would do is they would go out into the market. Let's say somebody who didn't even have any of these shares. What you could do is go out into the open market, buy 100 shares of Dunder Mifflin for $40 a share, which costs you $4,000. And if you bought this piece of paper for somebody, or you have one of these pieces of paper, then you can sell that 100 shares that you bought for $4,000 for $10,000 at $100 a share, right? $10,000. So you net a $6,000 profit. So what business economics would say is somebody would be willing to pay up to $6,000 for that contract, right? Because that's the potential profit you can make from this. If it was anything more or less, then the market would bring it in line. So $60 a share in profit, which times 100 shares, $6,000 profit. That's how much profit you would have from your, well, not profit, sorry. It's, we got to remember, we should use the word value. So this is the intrinsic value, right? Intrinsic value of that option is 60, or 6,000 for the entire contract. Now we got to subtract out the $1,500 in premium we paid to get to our profit. So $4,500 in profit, not too shabby. And that would be a ROI, return on our investment of $1,500 of 300%, right? So nice profit. So if Michael, he wasn't able to sell his shares, so he took a hit on his shares. So his shares went from being worth $10,000. You recall he bought them for $5,000 initially at $50 a share, right? So he had a $5,000 paper profit when it was at 100, and now it's fallen all the way down to 40, right? And so his shares have actually a loss now, a paper loss of $10 a share or $1,000. Let me write that out. So his shares, he bought at 50 or 5,000 because he bought 100 of them. And now let's say he sells them at 40, goes all the way down. So that's 4,000. That's an or. So let's say he collects $4,000. But as you can see, his put option made $4,500 in profit. So total, he's made. Well, let's back up so we can really go through it. So you recall the value of his put option was $6,000, right? $6,000. So when you add these two together, he sells the put, he sells the shares, he collects $10,000. But now we got to remember he paid $1,500 for the premium. So his profit's $8,500, which is equivalent to him being able to sell the shares at $85 a share, right? Times 100, he would have collected $8,500 total. So essentially, like we showed on that profit loss graph, he at least locked himself in so that he would not lose if the shares fell below $85. He would always, in every scenario, be able to walk away with $8,500. So as we go through this course, you'll start to understand this better. But this at least helps you understand the difference between calls and puts, how they work. Calls increase in value as the stock price goes up. Puts increase in value as the stock price goes down. And the opposite is true. Calls lose value as the underlying stock price goes down, and puts lose value as the underlying stock price goes up. So we'll cover that more in this course, but if you want to go back and rewatch this, feel free to do so.